The hall is cold. It is the 29th of September, and outside, the last of the harvest carts stand empty in the mud of the yard. This is Michaelmas, the end of the farming year in England, and the day the accounts are settled. Inside, a man in a plain wool gown is laying out sticks of hazel on a trestle table. Each stick is notched along one edge, then split down the middle, so that two men hold two halves of the same record and neither can lie about it. He is the Reeve. He has come to account for 12 months of grain, wool, rent, fines, and labor. Across the table sits the steward. Behind the steward, a clerk with a knife and a quill. And at the end, in the only chair with a back, sits the baron. They will be at this table until it is too dark to see, and when the last stick is matched and the last line is read out, there will be a number at the bottom of the parchment. That number is 25 pounds. 25 pounds. That is what is left of the year. Hold on to that figure because in about 30 seconds, I am going to tell you what came in. And the distance between those two numbers is the entire subject of this video. What came in was 300 pounds. 300 pounds a year in the early 13th century is a staggering amount of money. A plowman working the same soil might handle 2 pounds in a year, and most of what he lives on never becomes coin at all. A skilled mason on a royal building site earns a few pence a day. 300 pounds a year puts this man inside the wealthiest few hundred people in the kingdom. He is not gentry, he is not comfortable, he is one of the great landholders of England. And at the end of the year, he keeps 25 of it. This is the part almost nobody tells you about a medieval estate. It is not a treasure chest. It is not a pile of silver in a vault under a tower. It is a machine for turning land, weather, and labor into obligations, and it pays those obligations before it pays the man whose name is on the charter. It is not a purse, it is a machine, and the machine eats first. By the end of this video, you will know 4 things. You will know where 300 pounds a year actually comes from and why almost none of it arrives as money. You will know what eats the other 275 before the Lord touches a penny. You will know the 5 separate ways the crown can reach into a barony and which one of the 5 cannot be bought off at any price by anyone ever. And you will know why the man with the largest private income in England, something like £11,000 a year, ended his life kneeling in a field outside his own castle. And somewhere in the middle of all this, I am going to show you the strangest thing in the whole system: a record harvest. The best crop in a dozen years, barns full, carts groaning, and it left this estate poorer than the year before. Start with the unit everything is measured in: the knight's fee. A knight's fee is not a fixed number of acres. It is an amount of land judged capable of supporting one fully equipped knight and his household. In practice, by the 13th century, people reckon a single fee at somewhere around 20 pounds of annual value. Some are worth far less. A few are worth much more. The point of the unit is not precision. The point is that it converts land into military obligation. So the whole ladder is measured in fees. At the bottom, a man holding one knight's fee, 20 pounds a year. A hall, not a castle. A dozen or 2 households under him. He rides to war himself because there is nobody else to send. In the middle are baron, somewhere between 15 and 30 fees, scattered across 3 or 4 counties because holdings are almost never in one block. 200 to 400 pounds a year. A castle, or something that is trying to be one. A permanent household of 30 or 40 people who eat every day whether or not he is there. At the top, a great earl. 50, 80, 100 fees and more. Thousands of pounds a year. Several castles, a private administration with its own archive, and enough men that when he rides to London, the king counts the horses. Here is the important part. You cannot buy your way onto this ladder. There is no market in baronies the way there is a market in wool or wine. Land at this level moves through 3 doors only: inheritance, marriage, and royal grant. Money helps you survive on the ladder. It does not put you on it. The estate is not one thing. It is 2, and they behave completely differently. The first is the demesne. This is the land the lord farms directly, on his own account for his own barns. Think of it as the factory he owns and runs himself. Every bushel of wheat off the domain is his, and every failure on the domain is his too. The second is the tenant land. This is everything held from him by other people, in exchange for rent or for labor or for both. Think of it as a franchise network. He does not run it, he does not carry its risk, and he takes a fixed cut whatever happens on it. Now the mechanism that ties the two together, because this is the clever, brutal part of the whole system. The domain is largely worked by the tenants, not for wages, as rent. A villain holding 30 acres does not hand over silver every quarter. He owes week work, 2 or 3 days on the Lord's fields, every week of the year. And on top of that, he owes boon work at the pinch points, at haymaking and at harvest, when every hour matters and no free laborer can be hired at any sensible price. So the Lord's farm is staffed by people who are paying their rent with their arms and their backs. Look at what that does to the accounts. The domain produces grain, and the labor that produced it shows up nowhere as a cost, because it was never a cost. It was rent, collected in bodies instead of coin. On parchment, the domain looks like something close to pure profit, which is exactly why it is so dangerous. A line with no visible cost is a line nobody hedges. Rents in coin come next, and they are steadier than the harvest, but slower to move. A rent set 2 generations ago is still being paid at the old figure, because it is written in a charter, and the charter is the law of that holding. Inflation eats fixed rents quietly and permanently. Then come the monopolies, and these are better business than farming. The mill. Tenants are required to grind their grain at the Lord's mill and to pay a share of the flour for the privilege. Not a fee they negotiate, a duty they owe. Grinding at home with a hand quern is an offense, and manor courts fined people for it and confiscated the stones. The oven in some places. The brewing rights, the right to take fish or timber or pannage for pigs in the woods. And then the court. The manor court is not primarily justice, it is an income line. It finds a man when his beast strays into the corn. It takes the best animal from a dead tenant's holding before the family inherits. It charges a fee when a daughter marries outside the manor, and another when a new tenant enters a holding. Every one of those is small. All of them together are not. And unlike grain, the court does not depend on the weather. People die, marry, quarrel, and trespass in wet years and dry ones alike. In a bad year, when the barns are thin, the court is often the steadiest money on the whole estate. So that is the top line. Grain and wool off the domain, fixed rents from the tenant land, mill, oven, wood, and water, fines and dues from the court, 300 pounds. Except almost none of it is silver. The domain pays in wheat, barley, oats, cheese, wool, and timber. A portion of the rents comes in hens, eggs, and grain. Labor arrives as labor. The Lord's income has to be eaten, worn, burned, sold, or spoiled, and a good deal of it spoils. This matters more than any single figure in this video. When we say 300 pounds, we mean the assessed annual value of a bundle of rights, most of which never passes through a hand as coin. The estate is rich in things and poor in money, and everything that goes wrong from here goes wrong at that seam. Here is the promise I made at the start. It is a magnificent year. Warm spring, no late frost. Dry weeks exactly when the crop needed them. The domain yields perhaps a third more than usual. Every barn on the estate is full to the roof beams, and by the following Michaelmas, the estate is poorer than it was. The reason is that everybody else had the same weather. Bread demand does not stretch. A family that ate 2 loaves a day in a normal year does not eat 3 because the harvest was good. So when the whole of southern England brings in a third more grain, the extra grain has nowhere to go. Prices do not slip, they collapse. In a real glut, grain can lose half its value, or worse, and it happens fast, in the weeks after harvest, when everyone is selling at once and nobody has storage. Now look at who that hurts. It does not hurt the peasant with 15 acres very much. He eats most of what he grows and only sells a small surplus. Cheap bread is close to neutral for him, and in a good year, he is at least fed. It devastates the lord. Because the lord is the biggest seller in the district, the domain exists to produce a marketable surplus, and that surplus is the largest single source of actual coin on the estate. Halve the price of grain, and you have halved the money side of the business in one autumn. And the outgoings do not move at all. The household still eats. The castle roof still needs lead. The knights still need horses. The scutage, when it is demanded, is assessed on the number of fees, not on this year's grain price. The heir's relief, when it falls due, is fixed by the value of the barony, not by the market on the day. Then flip it and look at the opposite year. Famine. Grain triples in price. Wonderful, except the lord has nothing to sell, because his fields failed too. His tenants cannot pay their rents, because they are eating their seed corn. His court fines go uncollected because there is nothing to collect them from. And when the famine finally ends, some of his holdings are simply empty. So the estate loses in a glut, and it loses in a famine. This is the shape of the whole business, and it is worth saying plainly. A barony does not want a spectacular year. It wants an ordinary year, repeated 20 times without interruption. Its entire structure, the fixed rents, the standing household, the stone walls, the sworn obligations, is built for the average. And the medieval English climate does not do averages. It is not a purse. It is a machine. And the machine eats first. Now the 275. The largest single item is not war, and it is not the castle. It is the household. A baron does not live with a family. He lives with an institution. Knights of his household. Squires being trained. A steward who runs the whole estate. Bailiffs who run the individual manors. A clerk who keeps the writing. A chaplain. Cooks. Grooms. Huntsmen. Laundresses. Porters. 30, 40, sometimes many more, and every one of them is fed daily out of the barns. They are not paid in money mostly. They are paid in food, cloth, lodging, and a share of what the estate produces. That sounds cheap. It is not cheap. It is the reason the domain exists at all. And on top of the permanent household sits the obligation of hospitality, which is not optional and not sentimental. A lord who cannot feed visitors well is a lord whose standing is falling, and standing is the only currency that protects him at court. So there are guests, their servants, their horses, sometimes for weeks, which brings up one of the strangest facts about how these people actually lived. The household moves, constantly, because it is far cheaper to walk 40 people to a manor with a full barn than to cart the contents of that barn 100 miles to wherever the lord happens to be. The estate does not deliver food to its lord. The lord travels to his food, manor by manor, eating each one down before moving on, and then coming round again the following year. The castle. A castle is not an asset. On the accounts it behaves exactly like a debt that never matures. Building one at any serious scale is a project measured in years and in thousands of pounds, and the great royal fortresses of the period ran to sums that would swallow a middling barony's entire income for decades. Even a modest stone castle is beyond what most of these men could pay for in one lifetime, which is precisely why so many were built in stages by 3 generations, and why some were never finished at all. But construction is the smaller problem. The permanent problem is that stone in an English climate is always losing. Lead strips off roofs in gales. Timber rots, mortar washes out, wells foul. Something is being repaired every single year, and none of it is optional, because a castle that cannot be defended is not a castle, it is a very expensive barn. Then the garrison, then the stables, then the stores that have to be kept full against a siege that will probably never come, and rotated before they spoil. The military obligation, which is the reason the whole arrangement exists in the first place. The land was granted in exchange for knights. That is the deal. If the barony is assessed at 20 fees, then 20 armed and mounted men are owed to the king, and the baron finds them, equips them, and delivers them. Equipping one knight properly is genuinely expensive. Mail, helm, shield, sword, lance, the harness, the baggage, the servants, and above all, the horse. A trained warhorse is one of the most costly single objects in the medieval economy, worth many times a working plow horse, and it can be killed in the first 10 minutes of a battle. Now multiply by 20. There is a way out, and by the 12th century it is normal. Scutage, shield money. Rather than produce the bodies, the baron pays the crown a sum per knight's fee, and the crown hires professionals, who are frankly better soldiers anyway. It is convenient for everyone. It is also the moment the system quietly stops being about swords and becomes about cash flow. Because once service can be converted into money, the king discovers he would usually rather have the money. Remember that scutage can be paid off, because in about 90 seconds, I'm going to show you the one obligation that cannot. The crown has 5 separate ways into this estate. They are not taxes in the modern sense, they are rights attached to the land itself, and they follow the land through every generation. Lever 1. Relief. When a baron dies, the heir does not simply inherit, he pays for permission to inherit. Before Magna Carta, the sum was whatever the king said it was, and kings used it savagely against families they distrusted. Magna Carta in 1215 finally fixed it. £100 for a barony, £5 for a single knight's fee. £100. Against an estate assessed at $300 a year, that sounds survivable, even reasonable. Hold that thought. Lever 2. Wardship. If the heir is a minor, the crown takes the entire estate and holds it until he comes of age. Not as a trustee, as an owner. All revenues, for all those years, go to the king, or to whoever the king sells the wardship to. And the buyer has one interest only, which is to extract the maximum before handing back an estate he will never see again. Woods felled, stock sold, buildings left to rot, manors squeezed until the tenants leave. Now do the arithmetic against that £100 relief. A boy inherits at 8. The crown holds his lands for 13 years. Even if the wardship only yields a fraction of the estate's value each year, the total taken is many times the relief, and the estate handed back is damaged in ways that take another generation to repair. That is the trap in the whole system. The visible charge is modest and legible. The invisible one is enormous and depends entirely on when a man happens to die. Lever 3. Marriage. The crown controls the marriages of heirs and heiresses in its wardship, and of widows. This is the most valuable right of all, and it is openly traded. An heiress to a great estate is a transferable asset, and men paid extraordinary sums for the right to marry one, or to marry her to a son. Lever 4. Feudal aid. On certain occasions, the king can simply demand money from his tenants, to knight his eldest son, to marry his eldest daughter, and to ransom his own body, which stopped being theoretical in 1192, when Richard I was seized on his way home from crusade, and the ransom demanded was so vast that it had to be squeezed out of every layer of England at once. Lever 5. Escheat and forfeiture. If a line dies out, the land returns to the crown. If a man is convicted of treason, the land returns to the crown, and his heirs get nothing. This is the lever with no ceiling. And now the answer to the promise. Scutage can be bought off. Aid can be negotiated, delayed, argued down. Relief is fixed in writing after 1215. Wardship cannot be avoided in advance by anyone at any price, because it does not depend on the baron's choices at all. It depends on the age of his son on the day he dies. The richest man in England cannot buy insurance against dying at 42 with a 9-year-old boy. Here is why that top line matters more than the bottom one. £300 is not what he spends. It is what he is seen to be worth, and every one of those 5 levers is calculated against the seen figure, not the lived one. His relief is set by the standing of the barony. His aid is assessed on his fees. The price a courtier will pay for the wardship of his son is worked out from the estate's gross value. His scutage is counted in fees, not in profit. He lives on £25 and he is taxed as a man with 300. That is the central fact of noble life in this period, and it explains behavior that looks insane from the outside. The debts, the mortgaged manors, the desperate marriages, the willingness to gamble everything on a single royal favor. These are not men being reckless with wealth. They are men servicing obligations calculated on a number they never actually hold, which is why the fastest fortune in English history was not made by farming. William Marshall was a younger son with no land coming to him. What he had was skill in tournaments, which he treated as a business, riding the circuit for years and taking ransoms and horses off men he unhorsed. It made him famous. It did not make him a baron, because tournament winnings cannot buy land at that level. What made him a baron was a single grant. In 1189, the crown gave him the marriage of Isabel de Clare, heiress to enormous holdings on the Welsh March and in Ireland. One wedding, one afternoon, and a landless household knight in his 40s became one of the greatest landholders in the kingdom, and eventually Earl of Pembroke, and eventually the man governing England as regent for a child king. He did not out-earn anyone. He did not improve his yields. He was handed, by royal favor, an asset that could not be bought. That is the real capital market of this world. Not grain, not wool. Marriages, wardships, and the king's goodwill, and all three of them are issued from the same place. Now the other side of the ledger. Thomas, Earl of Lancaster, held 5 earldoms at once. His income is usually put at something in the region of £11,000 a year, which is not merely more than our baron, it is a different category of existence. He is the wealthiest subject in England by a distance, cousin to the king, with private castles and a private army. He also spent years in open opposition to Edward II. In March of 1322, his forces were broken at Boroughbridge. He was taken to his own castle at Pontefract, tried in front of the king, and beheaded outside it. Everything went to the crown. 5 earldoms of accumulated land, gone in an afternoon, by forfeiture. And that is the lesson that ties the two stories together. Scale in this system does not buy safety, it buys visibility. The bigger the number beside your name, the more attention you attract from the only institution that can take all of it at once. A minor knight with 1 fee can lose a lawsuit. A man with £11,000 a year can only lose everything. So who actually survived across generations? 3 habits show up again and again. The first is marriage discipline. The families that lasted treated marriages as the capital decisions they were. Not affection, not even alliance for its own sake, but the consolidation of scattered holdings into blocks that could be defended and administered. 2 estates in the same county are worth more than 2 estates 200 miles apart, and a family that spent 3 generations tidying its map was a family that stopped bleeding money on travel, on duplicated officials, and on holdings nobody was watching. The second is management discipline, and it means knowing when to stop farming. When grain prices are high and labor is cheap, run the domain directly and take the profit. When labor becomes scarce and expensive, as it did brutally after the plague reached England in 1348, direct farming turns into a trap, and the families that survived leased the domain out and took fixed rents from someone else's risk. The stubborn ones, who kept farming their own fields with hired hands at the new wages, destroyed themselves within 2 generations. The third, and the least glamorous, is paperwork. Your right to every acre rests on documents, charters, grants, confirmations, court rolls. The great houses kept cartularies, bound registers copying out every charter they held, precisely because a challenge might come 60 years later from someone who remembered better than you did. In a world where possession is argued in front of royal justices, the family with the archive wins. The family that lost its muniments in a fire loses land it has held since the conquest, and there is no appeal against an absence. Line them up. 1 knight's fee, around £20 a year. The household is small, there is no castle to feed, and the obligation is 1 man and 1 horse. Out of £20 he might keep 3 or 4 in a decent year. Proportionally, that is not bad. In a bad year, he is eating his seed corn like everybody else. Our baron, 300 a year, household, castle, 20 fees of service, and 5 royal levers pointed at him permanently. £25 left. Call it 8%. the great Earl, thousands a year, and the margin does not improve. It usually gets worse, because everything scales together and some things scale faster. More castles, each rotting independently. A household large enough to be a small town. Political obligations that require money spent in London, at court, on retainers, on gifts, on being seen. And the crown watching every acre of it. That is the counterintuitive result, and it is the thing to take away from this whole video. In this economy, the margin does not widen with size. Wealth here does not mean a larger surplus. It means a larger machine, with a larger appetite, and a shorter distance between one bad decision and total ruin. So come back to the cold hall. It is the 29th of September again, a year later. The same trestle table, the same split hazel sticks being matched half against half. The Reeve reads, the clerk writes, the steward listens for the lie, and the baron sits in the chair with a back and says almost nothing. Outside, the fields he is said to own are already being plowed for next year by men who will never own anything. The castle he is said to own needs 11 pounds of lead. The horses he is said to own belong, in every sense that matters, to a war that has not been declared yet. And when the last stick is matched, there will be a number at the bottom of the roll. It will be small. It always is, because he never owned an income. He owned a set of obligations that occasionally leaves a remainder. It is not a purse, it is a machine, and the machine eats first. That is the view from the chair with a back. Now turn the table around. In the next video, we take the same estate from the other end, the villain who owes 3 days a week on those fields, what his 30 acres actually produced, what he kept, and the one legal move that could make him a free man. It is on screen now.